Well, I first saw a porno video when I was 10 years old, and that was in the 80s, in the time of VHS, before the internet. And, grew up, went to an all-boys high school, and pornography is just, part of the paintwork. And I didn't start reflecting on it until I was listening to a whole lot of very politicized music in my teens and early 20s, and started reading about feminism and social justice issues and all the sorts of things I actually do for work now. And started, I guess, a whole process of decolonizing my own values and ideas around, around sex and around pornography and around the associated issues to do with it. And yeah, as I've gone on and I've had this evolving conversation for the last nearly 20 years, people are starting to wake up to the fact that pornography as it stands, speaking broadly and generally, because porn is a huge spectrum, but the porn most people look at is hugely problematic.
Is it fair to say that the pornography people are exposed to in 2018 is very different to that pornography that would have been around on the VHS tapes and in the Playboy magazines of 1980?
Yeah, very, very different.
How so?
Okay, so there's a professor called Robert Jensen whose work was hugely influential to myself, and I'm in contact with now. He's a professor in Texas. Porn is like any other sort of drug, whether it's alcohol or cocaine. You need more of it to get the same level of stimulus from your initial exposure. So the porn of the 70s and 80s was dimly lit, soft lighting, coy look, and these days it's very aggressive, very violent, because there's only so many sorts of ways that people can have sex. And then what's become the new stimulus, according to Jensen at least, and other academics, is cruelty. So without being too graphic on breakfast television. It goes from, girl on guy to like a group sex to choking and spanking, hair pulling, name calling. And, over time we've really sexualized violence and degradation. So if you look at the research now, like there are good bodies of literature that shows that we've linked like sex and hurting people. A lot of people think that that's quite normal behavior, when in fact it isn't. And unfortunately, because we don't have frank, honest conversations around sex with our young people, they grow up exposed to hardcore internet pornography, and they start recreating this behavior because no one's taught them otherwise and no one's given them critical filters. Now, that's not to say every person who looks at porn is going to go and recreate what they've seen and what they've consumed. And they're not going to say that every person who looks at porn becomes a porn addict.
It's a different standard of expectation.
But it sets a really different standard of expectation, not just for boys and young men about what they think they need to do, but also for young women to think what they need to accept. So it really does indoctrinate people in a very problematic way.
And clearly, pornography is the most accessible it has ever been in this modern era.
Yeah, it's, so if we hark back to the old days, you need to sneak into a bookstore or a dairy and buy something in a paper bag, and there's a little bit of like taboo around it. Now people like sit around looking at porno on their bus, on the bus ride, or shirt around the workplace, because it's anonymous, it's cheap, it's free. Like no one has to pay for it anymore. Super accessible, and you can do it in the privacy of wherever you've got a smartphone. And that's also part of the problem, is that sex becomes something that happens without any sort of relationship around it. I'm not saying you have to be married to have sex. There's nothing wrong with informed, consensual, casual sex. But sex is increasingly something that happens in isolation without any sort of relationship around it. Well, sexual gratification, not sex, sorry, sexual gratification, and by yourself. And so we're starting to see people having like problematic, sexual dysfunction.
Because they are effectively addicted to pornography?
No, it's not even the pornography of it. Sorry, it's not even the addiction of it. Sorry, I touched your knee without consent. But it's not even the addiction issue of it. It's so I speak in schools. A parent will come up to me and be like, "Oh, hey, my 16-year-old has erectile dysfunction because their normal sexual interactions with a person of their own age doesn't stimulate them the way that hardcore sex on the internet does. People have no idea about to have a kind conversation about sex. There's never hugging in pornography, or talks of consent, or can I do this, or does that feel good for you? So when I say sexual dysfunction, I'm talking not just like can't get it up anymore. I'm talking about how do you have a healthy, informed conversation about sex in pornography. And again, I'm speaking broadly and generally. When do you see condom use? Or when do you see conversations around, hey, if you don't like this anymore, just tell me to stop? Or, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's always men doing things to women, subject, verb, object.
What do kids tell you?
Kids are generally really receptive. Young men in particular will often, and I find this the best feedback I ever get, is when some young dudes will listen to my talk and find my Instagram and send me a message and be like, oh, I never thought about it like that before. Thanks for coming to my school. A really sort of like telling conversation for me was a group of young boys, one of them said, would smash. Are you familiar with that phrase?
As in, they would smash someone?
Yes. So,
right.
Thank you for the great segue. So we talk about smashes and like we'll have a fight or we'll break glass or whatever.
Yeah, but they're talking about smash as a synonym for sex.
Yeah, yeah. So
right.
smash is the new synonym for sex.
Right.
And that's through all our culture. You know, like Jeezy and rappers and stuff use it too. And they were talking about it like an attractive young woman, and I just was like, oh, how come you use the word smash? And they went, well, what else would you say? Because they've grown up in this culture that normalises that sort of parlance. So, you know, you just have a quick chat with them like, I wonder what her name is, or what's she interested in, or how would I talk to them? But it went straight to this aggressive term about destroying someone sexually, you know, and they're 14. They're not, and they're not bad kids. That's the thing. They're not bad kids. They're kids who've grown up in a culture which normalises that. Yeah. And so when you stop and break it down for them, they're actually really receptive to it, because young men want to have good sex and healthy relationships, but what we've taught them is super damaging from the get-go.
So how do we fix that? Because I mean, you can't stop.
You're not going to stop pornography. I don't even believe in banning anything. You know, like banning things and censoring things. That creates problems too. You know, I don't want to hark back to the Victorian ages. Like, I think it's a problem. Like
prohibition caused.
Yeah, prohibition caused problems.
It's not going to work. But also it's unrealistic to think that kids aren't going to be able to access this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Welcome to the internet.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately a lot of like highlighting the problems of porn, people think you're anti-sex. Like, I'm super sex positive. I'm like, yo, I want everyone to have good, healthy sex.
So what do we do?
I really support Tracy Martin's concept of making sure that there's strict age verification. If you're not sure who Tracy Martin is, she's New Zealand's first MP. Strict age verification, making sure that people can't look at porn or limit access to porn under age of 18. You know, your brain's still developing up until your mid-20s, you know. We're seeing kids get their synaptic pathways, like their reward pathways, wired really hard from like 10 years old. Massive problem. So how do we limit access to that using technology? How do you get the government to enact legislation so that porn access is limited? I think we need really, really, really good education in schools, because at the moment it's haphazard. You know, like an individual like me or an organisation will go in, and if good organisations doing this work will go into a school by invitation. But, you know, Board of Trustees can veto that if someone at Board of Trustees doesn't feel comfortable with the nature of conversation. Every school's different. So you need uniform education to give young people the critical filters, not for if they see porn, but for when they see porn. Because even if you're not looking for porn, it'll come through in your inbox.
And it's not just an issue for guys.
It's not just an issue for guys, you know, or someone will text you this, or hey, look at this, or you get a virus, you know, or someone will see some stupid spam email. Kids are going to encounter pornography. Because of the nature of pornography, it is stimulating. You know, like everyone has a natural interest about sex and wants to explore it, and when we're not giving kids robust education around it, they'll seek it out. And what they're finding when they seek it out isn't a healthy conception of what sex and relationships is. It's not saying like adventurous sex is a bad thing, or group sex is a bad thing, or whatever it is you're into. Go crazy. You know, like, explore your sexuality, but do it in a healthy, informed, kind way. You know, because you know what? Like, your sex will be better, and no one will get hurt emotionally or physically. You know, we kind of have divorced sex from building relationships. I'm not saying you have to be in a relationship to have good sex. You don't, you know, but even if it's just a one-night stand, you can have a much better sexual experience when no one feels emotionally hurt or used or physically damaged or degraded, if we know how to have kind conversations around that. And unfortunately, porn's not teaching that, but that's where most people get their ideas from these days.